New Orleans, Louisiana, founded in 1718, is a city rich in history, from a place where one can party all night to also where it's not hard to find someone who's experienced something that they can't quite explain. There are numerous stories of unexplainable deaths, gruesome murders, witchcraft, vampires, and more that have given New Orleans a reputation as not only a place where the good times roll, but is also one of the most haunted cities in the United States. In a city where ghost tours are one of the main tourist attractions, it can only be a matter of time before you yourself find yourself experiencing something of the supernatural. This brings us to today's topics of some of New Orleans' most infamous supernatural hotspots. I myself have been on 2 ghost, witchcraft, and vampire tours around the city, and in this speech, I'd like to take you on some of my favorite spots in New Orleans. The New Orleans Pharmacy Museum, the Ursuline Convent, and the home of the Comte Jacques Saint-Germain. Our first stop is the New Orleans Pharmacy Museum, seen here, actually the spot of the very first pharmacy in the United States. In a journal, Pharmacy and History by Laurel Dorrance, it writes that Louis Delfino Jr. was the first pharmacist in the United States by passing the pharmacy licensing exam in 1816. However, according to an article in the Pharmacy Times by Eileen Oldfield, Dr. Joseph Dupas, the second owner of the pharmacy, is actually who is believed to still haunt the building to this day. Dr. Dupas, he completed just horrific experiments on pregnant slaves and other vulnerable people, resulting in many deaths. Dr. Dupas died in 1867 due to complications with syphilis, but he is still believed to linger on and haunt the building to this day. There have been reports of a lab coat wearing apparition, items being moved around in display cases, and even books being thrown when there's no living person around. There's also reports of fire alarms going off, once again, when no one is in the building, and it is believed that all of these happenings are Dr. Joseph Dupas. Now that we filled our prescription for fear at the Pharmacy Museum, our next stop is the Ursuline Convent, aka the home of the Casket Girls. The New York Historical Society writes that the New Orleans needed a larger population, so the Ursuline Convent actually welcomed in young women from France for the current settlers to marry. However, these women arrived mysteriously in the night, dragging these large boxes, as most people have called them today, caskets, into the attic of the convent. According to the Terrebonne Parish Library's website, strange things started to occur not long after the girls arrived, such as there were reports of night walking and blood-sucking creatures, bodies being found completely drained of blood, and motions and weird noises within the attic of the convent where the girls stayed. It's unsure whether or not the girls themselves were vampires, or as some have speculated, that they smuggled vampires into the city and released them out of their caskets upon arrival, but people still say that they see suspicious activity happening within the windows of the convent's attic, making them wonder if the girls brought all these years ago still inhabit that very attic. Although there is much speculation about these Casket Girls actually being vampires, our next and final stop is the home of the Comte Jacques Saint-Germain, who many believe to be a true New Orleans vampire. Saint-Germain arrived to the city completely full of wealth, charm, and beauty, and many had wondered where all of his wealth came from, even though he could not totally provide an answer. He said that he was the descendant of a famous aristocrat, also known as Saint-Germain, from Europe, but many believed that they were one and the same person because they looked just alike. They thought maybe Saint-Germain had just made himself immortal through all this time, and that is how he had stayed wealthy throughout all of this. However, once he arrived to the city, he began throwing lavish parties within his home. I like to think of him as a vampire-esque Great Gatsby, and many people enjoyed these parties and would come and party all night. This was all up until one night whenever a woman jumped from the terrace on the second level, and passerbys were alerted and ran to her, and they asked her what had happened, and she said that she was jumping to escape a vampire that had attacked her within Saint-Germain's home. So instantly, the people that had helped this woman went and alerted police and told them what had happened, and the police said, "Oh, it's late, and we know Saint-Germain, we'll check on him in the morning." So To their surprise, when the police got to Saint Germain's house, it was completely empty. There was no Saint Germain, no trace of him, but nothing seemed out of place or suspicious, so they thought, maybe he was just gone. They searched the house high and low, could not find anything of suspicion until they got to his wine cellar. And they thought, well, if he's gone, we might as well indulge in what's here. And they poured themselves glasses of wine. But to their surprise, those bottles were not just your typical wine, but a mixture of both wine and human blood, leaving many people to believe Saint Germain truly was a vampire. We are now finished with our tour of New Orleans' most haunted and supernatural locations: the New Orleans Pharmacy Museum, the Ursuline Convent, and the home of the Comte Jacques Saint Germain. Almost from the very beginning of New Orleans' founding, there are tales of ghosts and vampires preying on the city. So the next time you visit and experience something out of the ordinary, you yourself may have just had a run-in with one of New Orleans' very own supernatural residents. Thank you.